I'm Lucas Barry from Carmody Groarke Architects. This is a talk about the Großmarkt Theatre Pavilion, which is a temporary hospitality space that we delivered for Mir Theatre in Hamburg at the start of 2020. Mir Theatre, we're building a new theatre within the historic market hall behind our building. And the project was about making a space to manage the arrival of audiences in and out, and also offer an expanded hospitality experience as part of the new production for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the first German language version of the play, which is often experienced over 2 parts over a full day. The site itself is located just to the east of the centre of Hamburg. And as you can see, Hamburg is a port city defined by a very direct relationship to water. And this particular site just to the north of Oberhafen is a tributary of the river Elbe that runs through the centre of Hamburg. And traditionally, this whole area has been a site of industry, a point of import and export, and like many European cities, has begun to redefine itself through culture and the arts. And perhaps the most well-known area for that is here, just to the west, Hafen City, and right on the peninsula there you have the Elbe Philharmonie, which is perhaps the symbol of this transformation. Just before I go into a description of the project, we've been working in Hamburg, and I just wanted to briefly show some other projects that we've looked at recently. And this is Dock 10, also in the centre of Hamburg. As you can see, it's a dry dock, and very prominently located in the centre of Hamburg. The dry dock is essentially where ships and large vessels are go to be repaired and maintained. And we participated in a competition to redefine that piece of infrastructure. This was our competition proposal. The idea was to give a very visible industrial piece of infrastructure a more civic presence, given its central Hamburg location. And the proposal was to kind of amplify the utility of the structure and create, through a very figured roof form, a space that firstly could be used all year round, operating on ships all year round, but also showcase the presence of industry in the heart of Hamburg. You can see there the new figured silhouette of the proposal that we put forward. This is Steindam, another project that we're working on, also in Hamburg. This project was taking an existing commercial office building, and the proposal was to add essentially an exoskeleton to the existing building, creating additional space, but also winter gardens, new circulation, which was all wrapped around a retained existing rectilinear building. So back to the site of the theatre pavilion, this is the location of the project. You can see in relation to the rest of Hamburg, and this parcel of land has a very regular nature to it. It's very flat, and you can see very distinctly the market hall in the middle. And this image shows really well the kind of almost diagrammatic way in which the site is laid out for its function. So you have the market, the Großmarkt in the middle, which is a wholesale market for fruit and veg. And then around it, you have a series of expansive car parking and lorry parking for the incoming and outgoings of fresh produce. One of the complexities of this project was that the Großmarkt is still serving as the main fruit and veg hub for Hamburg. So the project was about trying to work with that constraint. The Großmarkt has about 1.5 million tons of fresh produce passing through it each year. And on a busy market day, which you can see in this image, the presence of all of these trucks and vans is quite substantial. So this is really one of the key constraints that we were working with on this project. As well as the kind of operational aspect of the project, the Großmarkt is also a listed heritage building. It was designed in 1962, designed and built in 1962 by Bernhard Hermkes, the architect. The building is essentially 3 interconnected halls formed of in situ concrete parabolic arches, which have this very kind of fluid nature inside. In each hall, you have this incredible diffuse north light coming from this bank of windows to the north. And the exterior of the wholesale market is kind of continues that expressionist, very lyrical nature to it. So the parabolic arches are expressed on the outside, and it has this very fine stone detail in this series of vertical panels. And this is the elevation of the Großmarkt as it is today, which we encountered on our first visit. This is an existing site plan just showing the starting point that the client gave us. So essentially they didn't stipulate a shape or location of the building, only that the new building needed to be around 600 square meters of internal hospitality space, that it would be around 10 to 15 years, so it's a temporary building, and that it needed to coexist with the working aspect of the market. And you can see all of the lorry and car parking markings in that site plan. The theatre which the building serves was being built, was designed by another architect, F101 Architekten. Essentially, it sits within the central hall of the Großmarkt. The idea behind that project is that it basically doesn't touch any of the existing structure. So it sits very snugly within those parabolic arches, and it's around 3,000 audience capacity. And I think this is one of the key kind of aspects of the project that we started to explore. So this is a drawing showing 24 hours, a typical 24 hours at the Großmarkt. And on the left-hand side, you can see the nocturnal side of the market. So the fruit and veg aspect of it is kind of in operation from around midnight until around 9 a.m. And then the site transfers to the operation of the theatre. And here you can see the show in 2 parts, so roughly 2 hours per part, and split by relatively significant intermissions, and the middle one being the assumption that the audience would get lunch. So the project was about trying to create capacity to offer audiences fresh space and somewhere other than the theatre itself in order to refresh themselves. And in order to understand the offer, we did a drawing and looked at 20 minutes as a route around the site, and it shows the practicality really of the need for a hospitality space to be quite close to the venue itself. As you walk around this site, there is not many places that offer a substantial meal that would make it both practical and enjoyable to be part of that visitor experience. One of the only places that we did find was this lovely cafe, the Oberhafen Canteen, which if anyone has been, they'll know has a particular nature to the interior. This is a photograph that I took on one of the dining tables. The whole building is on this incline, which is, it kind of really helps you feel part of the nautical side of Hamburg. This photo I thought was a really good reminder of the practicality, again, of being quite close to the theatre. This is from the Elbphilharmonie, which shows a rainstorm approaching, and I think that it just is another part of this this visitor experience that we were trying to contain within the market location itself. So the design process, we started with the approach to the existing market hall as a piece of heritage context, but we were also very conscious of the need to be compatible with the movement of vehicles around the site. So there are other pieces of infrastructure and ramps that we were starting to look at. It made sense for us to think about this location right in front of the central hall as the location of a new building. Through a series of development models, we looked at a number of different formal ideas, and we opted for a circular form, as we felt it answered a number of different questions about how people arrive at the site, and also how a building might have some kind of formal relationship to this more kind of primary structure behind it. One of the benefits we saw of a circular form is that it doesn't really offer a front and a back, so it essentially can be experienced all the way around, and it might actually help with the movement of vehicles around its circumference. It also struck us that the circular form might have some kind of interesting relationship with this very lyrical expressionist market structure that it sat in front of. And this is one of the first concept drawings that we did. You can see that we proposed this very dramatic cantilevered roof form. So firstly, that announces the shape of the building, but it also has a practical nature to it. So it protects arriving audiences around its perimeter on the assumption that they would be queuing to enter the building. And this shows that moment as you come in. So we were interested in the idea that the building form might be also quite expressive of its structure, in this case, timber, and that maybe internally the idea could be that the space revolves around a central courtyard. So there is some aspect of a kind of surprising element to it as you come in, but also maybe this could bring light deep into the space and also help with passive ventilation. And this was one of the drawings that we did looking in the first kind of process of analysing the site into how the different kind of confluence of people and vehicles would work. So people essentially kind of come around here, arriving at the main gate and passing through the pavilion into the theatre itself. And at the same time, in other parts of the day, vehicles can still move very directly or indirectly around this building. And we felt that the circular form made that easier. So the coexistence of those two buildings easier. I wanted to just touch on some projects that have definitely informed this approach. This is a project, part of a number of different projects that we looked at in the past that have played with the idea of timefall temporary pavilions. This particular project was intended to last for just 3 days as part of Frieze Art Fair. It was conceived of as a series of timber pavilions, essentially arranged around a series of existing trees in Regent's Park. And you can see that the structural idea was around this series of stacked timber beams, creating a series of hospitality spaces, both inside and outside. And the temporary structures were intended to offer some kind of respite from the main tent from Frieze Art Fair, which is just on the top of this drawing. This project was Studio East Dining in 2010. This was intended to last for 3 months as part of the lead up to the 2012 Olympic Games. This was a dining experience which was very, firstly, internalized. So the idea of this was about bringing together a series of volumes, I should say, to create a communal dining room, which you can see in this plan form, where a series of communal tables are essentially kind of intersecting. So rather than a kind of individualized dining experience, this was very much about trying to gain some kind of collective experience as part of a wider collective understanding of the changing nature of that part of London at the time. And another project that looked at another changing part of London, this time in King's Cross in 2011. This was right at the start of the redevelopment of King's Cross. And in a similar vein, This project was about taking a piece of existing infrastructure, in this case a petrol station, and making a dining experience, an event space which offered some kind of protection from a very busy site. So you had York Way and Goods Way, busy construction roads at the time, and then this lovely very under-experienced canal side at the time. So this series of protective screens offered this collective experience overlooking that canal. So I think that there is a thread of themes that have run into this project. And this particular project, this pavilion, was also looking to offer a distinctly different experience to that of its interior, to its master experience. So you can see here the theatre on the right and our circular building form on the left-hand side. So firstly, obviously they are physically detached, but there is a number of functions that work kind of together as one. So in arrival experience, you see this building as essentially a kind of arrival pavilion, but in the process of its operation, it very much becomes a fluid part of the interior of the theatre, as well as some of the hospitality experiences. So you can see that the building is itself defined by its circular form, but then internally is very much kind of defined by a square form kind of hospitality hall. And you have a series of 4 main hospitality functions: bars, restaurants, and toilets, located on 4 corners, which essentially set out a structural diagram. Visitors enter by a series of raised steps or ramps and circulate through the building and then into the to the construction of the theatre itself. And this is the plan form in isolation. So the building is essentially 38 meters in diameter, and it has 32 main beams that are arranged radially around this 10-meter wide courtyard. And the structural diagram is simple. Essentially, you have these main beams which sit on cross beams which form the square hall within. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But you can see here that the main hospitality functions are essentially these front-facing bars and food outlets, which basically offer lots of different menus and choices to the people, to the audience within the theatre. This was an early study model that we did of the project that shows our intention to use timber structure, and that the hospitality functions would essentially hover below that. One of the original ideas that we had was that the interior, or your arrival into this space, and the interior quality of it should have a theatrical sense to it. So there's some kind of transformation or surprise that you get from coming from the outside to inside. One of our often go-to references is the Eagle Pub, and specifically its beautiful lacquered ceiling that you can see in this image. So one of the ideas that we had was maybe about using the sense of reflection as part of a way of amplifying activity or the movement of different people. So we were interested originally in the idea of cladding the building in a bright natural aluminium, and what we liked about the optical effect of this corrugated profile was that it had a really lovely way of subtly reflecting its exterior environment. And it might be a nice kind of starting point to think about the way that we could set a new building in composition with the very distinct tones of the Großmarkt. This section shows the very deliberate attempt really to make a formal relationship between that central hall and the new building. So this section shows the courtyard in the middle, the idea of the external verandas and the hospitality hall itself in the middle. The other idea that hopefully is clear here is that you can see that the building is very distinctly kind of hunkered down so that it doesn't impede the very kind of impressive elevational quality of the Großmarkt. These sections working towards a series of technical level drawings were showing how the perimeter and the structure was resolved. First of all, you can see that the building is founded on these screw piles, and these are literally going into the slab of the Großmarkt forecourt. And the perimeter itself is resolved around this veranda idea. So this kind of raised section is really trying to deal with the change of level across the site, which we devised through the need to deal with a very distinct level change across the site in general. So it's about a meter from one side of the building to the other. What this does is it basically allows the internal experience of that hospitality room to potentially come outdoors as well. So this figure offers some level of protection. It also means that we can hide lots of passive forms of ventilation in the head detail around the perimeter walls. And this was one of the first set of drawings that we did with the Swiss main contractor and the German specialist timber fabricators. So the structure itself ended up being a hybrid of CLT and glulam. One of the benefits of choosing this approach is that, firstly, it cuts down time on site. It's a very low carbon solution for a building of this particular time span, and that it means that the building can be entirely demountable and reconstructed elsewhere. So one of the ideas behind this project is that it could be entirely remade and repurposed away from the Großmarkt. So as we started to construct the building, you can see here, this is the floor deck going down, which kind of resembles a large spider web almost, and a series of screw piles around each main floor beam, which then started to come out the ground very quickly. So it was erected in just 2 weeks as a kind of primary structure. You can see there in its kind of almost skeletal form, a really nice, beautiful counterpoint to that expressionist facade. One of the interesting things, certainly that I observed as part of the process of this project, was how rudimental some of the construction techniques are for this structural solution. So essentially, the whole thing is screwed together with these gigantic screws and bashed into shape. And this shows one of the I guess one of the kind of key connections between the floor itself, the main kind of posts which form the outer perimeter, and a series of stud walls which form the external appearance of the building. As the building came and started to become watertight, this, I should say watertight, it wasn't at the time, which was apparently the Swiss contractors were very relaxed about this at the time, but we were less relaxed. This shows the space coming together as a whole. So you can see the internal courtyard emerging here, and the cross beams that form the square space. And I think this drawing shows really well the simplicity of this structural diagram. Essentially, the main beams are sitting on these posts and these cross forms, which essentially form the internal space within. This shows the aperture nicely reflected in the puddle as it was closing out. So it developed really quickly from that moment, and these are the finished photographs of the building. So this shows the entrance as it was before. So you have a series of steps up to the entrance doors on the left and right hand side, and you can see, I think what's really obvious here is how that circular form starts to play with the Großmarkt behind. And here is one of the entrances which leads to that dining hall within. And what we really liked is the idea that potentially the idea of this this bright aluminium could be brought inside, and that those original ideas about bringing reflectivity to make a very vibrant space within, I think work really well. So you can see the hall itself, the cladding, the aluminium is literally wrapped inside to form that square hall. We chose to lacquer the ceiling in a black lacquer, and I think that that worked really well. The photographs are very somber here, but when the lights come on, unfortunately we never got to see the opening due to COVID, but there is a really distinct change in atmosphere when you get this kind of very incandescent light and very theatrical nature to the hall itself. So it can really change from day to night, from natural light to artificial light. And you can see that we've defined the floor with this very strong burgundy, essentially warehouse paint on the floor, which has this really lovely tone that's picked up in the surrounding aluminium cladding. And this is the final building in context. So you can see it here coexisting as it was originally intended with the working element of the market. And the project was essentially 16 weeks on site in total. I think, as I said, it officially opened in March 2020, and it has since become a working part of that theatre. And I think one of the things that we were particularly happy with was the way in which we received lots of encouragement and support from the client and from the Hamburg city architects that were really supportive of the approach. That's it. I'd like to thank in particular Jakob Hübner, who was the project architect for this, and he was instrumental in bringing this to life. Thank you very much.